most brands in the world right now, but especially brands that sell product that are either coming into the US or selling in the US, they're very nervous about their margins for obvious reasons right now. And all of a sudden you can start to say, well, I want to advertise more premium products. But consumers don't want to buy the product that's $40 when they could buy the product that's $10. But if you can prove that consumers who buy the product for $10 will eventually buy that same product 3 more times, or will eventually trade up to the product that's $40, but only if you get them through the door first, that's really compelling. And that's a really good use of ad money. So that's been the way where we've been talking with a lot of brands who care much more about premium and trading up and margin. We've been able to show them you can still get margin. It's just a long-term play, but you have to have a foot in the door first. If you don't have a fighter, then you lose before you start.
Welcome back to the Commerce Collective podcast. I am your host, Emma Irwin, brand marketing manager here at Flywheel, and today we're talking all about how to use AMC insights to inform more efficient new-to-brand acquisitions and drive long-term value through brand loyalty. We'll start this episode by catching up a bit on the continued importance of AMC, even beyond just your media strategies, and then we'll dig into the importance of leveraging new-to-brand and long-term value as key metrics for success. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get right into re-meeting, or maybe even at this point, re-meeting our guest for this episode.
Danny Hoffman, Senior Director of Commerce.
Well, in the time since we recorded this episode, Danny's title has changed, so I'm here to tell you that he's now our global head of Amazon strategy here at Flywheel. Back to the interview. Okay, you're familiar with this question. What is the last thing that you purchased on Amazon?
I am familiar with this question. So I bought matzah meal on Amazon, and I bought haggadahs on Amazon because it was Passover a few weeks ago. And I've been living in London for 1.5 years, and I realized that I don't own all of the prerequisites to throw a proper Seder. So I was making my grandmother's matzah ball recipe and was missing most of the ingredients. So thank you, Amazon.
They have everything you could ever need. I mean, we know this.
The endless aisle. Truly endless.
My first question for Danny to kick us off was to tell you about how AMC has evolved since the last time we chatted, why it's still so important, if not even more important, for brands to be digging into in order to uncover performance insights and help inform your growth strategies.
This is like a very Patrickism, but this is the Flywheel perspective too, is like the beauty of digital commerce is that you can measure the point of sale. My first job out of college, I worked for a marketing department, and one of my jobs was putting billboards in high schools. So I had to figure out the ROI of putting a banner on a high school gymnasium scoreboard. And I don't know what the ROI is because there isn't one. But that's the beauty of retail media and why so many brands are putting money here is that you can actually measure the impact of dollars, euros, pounds that you put in. And AMC is the next iteration of that, where I'm no longer talking in terms of antiquated metrics like ROAS, and now I'm thinking in terms of CID, like how am I engaging with my consumers and my users, which is very cool. And it's also very brand. And so it takes us kind of out of the corner of nerdy e-com and back into the traditional marketing and CMO type world.
Okay. We talk a lot about AMC from the lens of media, but what have you been experimenting with when it comes to AMC for retail tactics? Just because I know this is an initiative that you've kind of led and been like, hey, it's not all about media.
The beauty of running advertising through Amazon is that can touch all of these retail signals and you can influence all of these things. And I think we use Amazon Marketing Cloud a lot to figure out who are my consumers, what are they likely to buy, what are they likely to buy first, what are they likely to buy next. That specific thing is something that it's not just, oh, what is my hero product that I advertise in all portions of the funnel and then what do I retarget with, but I can use that for my variation strategy. And I could say, oh, consumers who buy A and B, those things should probably be on the page together, whether it's twisted together on a PDP or whether it's showing up in my content or next to each other in my brand store. I can start to think about not just, oh, I really want to get consumers to repeat purchase, but AMC and Subscribe and Save have a really friendly relationship. I can create custom Amazon Marketing Cloud audiences based on consumers who subscribe or are likely to subscribe or who look like subscribers. That's a retail signal. So there's a lot of ways in which we're thinking about that. Even with my promotional strategy, Amazon Marketing Cloud lets us see the speed to conversion, which type of media drives the most conversion. But my promotion will carry all the way through to all of my ads too. It doesn't just show up on my PDP. And that's traditionally retail. So it's not just, oh, how does AMC help my retail strategy, or how does AMC help my media strategy, but how does AMC help my commerce strategy? And these things are all linked together. And I think that's what's really exciting to me about this. It's all of the questions I would otherwise be asking, but all linked together in one place.
Yeah, I like that it like forces us to break out of the silo of treating media and retail differently, and like having different people assigned, whether it's on the brand side or even our side, to what tasks you're doing. You're like, everybody, you just have to kind of be aware of everything because everything is connected.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm really excited about with AMC is also because you can see user behavior and you can also take information outside of the ecosystem and put it into this clean room. All of a sudden now I can start to play with in-market audiences that look like my consumers, whether within the Amazon channel or within my D2C or CRMs that I've built. But like, let's say that I sell whiskey and I find out that my whiskey consumer also loves to play piano, made up example, but that's a really great opportunity to be able to, I put that in my content and my, like on my PDP, and I show a glass next to a piano, or I can even bring some version of that into a Prime Video ad. I could bring that into my social. You can use the signals within Amazon and that you get from AMC to not just talk in terms of like traditional demographics, but actually what is my consumer most likely to buy, and what does my consumer look like that I can replicate elsewhere. I mean, even like new product development is an amazing lens of that too, where there's a brand I know where they've been trying to figure out what will consumers use their product next to. And when you compare multiple categories, you start to realize like, oh yeah, consumers who buy this brand also drink a lot of coffee. And they're considering a potential like new product innovation that relates to their product that's made as a coffee creamer, because you can get that type of data from Amazon, which is that's the power of all this.
All right. Now that we've caught up on how brands should be thinking about AMC and the importance of AMC at a very broad level, we're going to dig into two of our favorite connected metrics here at Flywheel, new to brand and long-term value, both of which heavily rely on insights from AMC. I asked Danny for a quick look at why these metrics are exciting to both him and the brands he's talking to every single day.
My business is a combination of acquiring new consumers and getting those new consumers to purchase my brand over time and become loyalists. If I do those two things, I take market share. And it's sometimes that simple. And so obviously there's a lot of different layers of complexity that go into that, but those two things together are giving us a view of a metric that I think we've talked about in theory, but we've never actually had a metric around, which is the ratio between cost of acquisition and long-term value. And so we can actually measure long-term value. And so what we've been doing is we've been replacing things like ROAS with things like long-term value with brands and telling them, hey, prioritize your budget based on where the LTV is. And they are loving it because it's really clean and really simple, and it resonates all the way up to the decision makers who hold the dollars. So that's, I think, what I'm most excited about, because that's what they're most excited about.
Okay. I'm going to have us start digging into some tactics here. And I like to start with talking about new to brand, because before you can ever increase consumer long-term value, you have to get a new to brand consumer to make their first purchase, right? And you want your media efforts to be focused on new to brand shoppers who are actually likely to convert, because not everyone is. And then you want to drive that loyalty over time. That's why AMC insights, which help you uncover who those consumers are so important. So I asked Danny, where do I start with figuring out who is actually worth it to try and acquire as a new to brand consumer?
One of the things that Amazon gives you is like, you know the point of sale, but you know what consumers are likely to buy. And so often for me, I start with the product. What is the point of market entry? And so what I mean by point of market entry is that if I'm a new consumer entering a category, what is the thing that I'm most likely to purchase first? And so what we've been doing is we've been showing brands, this is the product that consumers are most likely to enter with. Start with that. So the example that comes to mind is there's a pimple patch brand, and they have a 36 pack and they have a 72 pack. And the 36 pack is, made up numbers, 15 euros, and the 72 is twice that. Their temptation initially is to advertise the 72 because their ROAS will be higher. But we were able to prove to them that more than any other, the product that was cheaper is the one that consumers enter with as a point of trial. But we can also then, you can get to the specific consumers who are entering that market with that particular product. And you could say, all right, so 10% of those consumers also bought the 72 pack. And so then you do a little bit of correlation and linear thinking, and you realize somebody entered with the cheap one. They overlap with the same users that buy the expensive one. These consumers are trading up. And then you could see the amount of time it takes for them to trade up too. And so then all of that gives you a really clear view of consumer behavior. But then the math behind it is a consumer buys a 15 euro product. They then buy a 30 euro product. That consumer who I thought was worth 15 to me is actually worth 45. And so I have what is true measurable long-term value on that consumer level. And then also I can scale that.
I'm curious in this example, in terms of this trading up from 36 to 72, when you're looking at those like 10% of people, is that an organic trade up, or were there efforts in place to then get people to trade up over time with a media strategy?
Could be either. So in this case, it was intentional. But the beauty of AMC data is that you can see what consumers are actually doing, and then you use it as not just an insight, but an insight that could potentially lead to action. So I see that 10% of those consumers are trading up, but I change my retargeting strategy. In the next quarter, when I revisit that, or next month, when I revisit that data point, do I see a change? Is it now 20% of those consumers? Or have I increased the number of new consumers that are buying the 36? That 10% can stay the same, but I've still increased the total pool of people that are buying the 72. So that's the reason why we talk in terms of acquire new consumers and get them to become loyalists. Because the goal is if I increase the pie of the people who are buying that entry product, that rate of people who from that initial pie traded to the higher level or more premium product could stay the exact same. But if I've increased that number of people from 100 to 1,000, 10% is obviously much higher in terms of quantity. So that's the eventual goal, is get the most people who know my brand and then an equal or higher rate of those people who become brand loyalists.
Gotcha. I'm curious, like we're talking very specifically about like one product and one product line of what I know is a giant portfolio. And I'm also thinking about like your statement on like, it's overwhelming. There's everything that you can do. How do you take this very specific insight? Like it's an incredible insight, but how do you scale that across a catalog of a bazillion items?
Yeah, so the beauty of segmentation, right? I think we sometimes forget that how powerful segmentation is, but if I have 1,000 ASINs and I can put them into buckets that are either 3 brands or 5 subcategories or whatever it is, the same math applies at scale. And so if I can see the value of consumers that enter and the value of consumers that return, so let's say that for a particular brand within my catalog, I get $100 for every entry purchase. So like initial purchases, of the $100 worth of purchasers, $50 returns back to purchase again, same product or a different product. The total value is 150, if that makes sense. So the ratio between those two things is the total value, 150, relative to the entry value, 100. And so now I have a metric, 1.5. And that is the value of long-term value. That is consumers that were worth $100 to me today are worth $150 to me over the course of 13 months, 5 years, whatever the data set is. And I could take that ratio, that 1.5, and then I start to look at my media investment. And so if I'm thinking of like, how much can I spend to acquire a new consumer today that I know is going to be worth $100 to me? That consumer today, usually without that metric, most brands would be like, I can only spend up to 100. I can only spend up to the maximum. I have to be 1-to-1. I have to break even. But my break even is actually 1.5x that value. And I can do that by brand. I can do that by category. But what that gives you is that gives you a view across your entire business of however you budget, what is my threshold to budget, and where do I get the most long-term value by segment? And then the stuff where I get the best long-term value, some segments, that ratio might be 1.2. That ratio might be 1.8. That ratio might be 2.5. Put your money there. Put your money in the place where you're likely to get the most return over the course of the entire period that you're considering. And that's going to differ totally by different product categories. So like if I'm in the headphone space or the kitchen space, my long-term value might be really low. But it's also very possible that if I'm in the kitchen space, my long-term value could be really high because somebody buys an air fryer, but that same air fryer purchaser might downstream also buy knives and buy pans and buy all these other things within my kitchen. And so the goal is take an air fryer purchaser and make them a brand loyalist.
Jumping in to recap what we've just covered. Are Amazon fees eating into your profits, or is your supply chain generally just giving you a bit of a headache? Let's fix that. At Flywheel, our experts recover lost dollars from shortages, chargebacks, and co-op deductions, putting real money back where it belongs. Your bottom line, of course. With an industry-leading recovery rate up to 85% and over $120 million recovered for our clients so far, we know how to spot and solve the issues others miss. But we don't stop there. Our supply chain consultants deliver tailored playbooks, root cause analyses, and smart strategies to streamline operations, cut costs, and keep your brand running like clockwork no matter how complex your business gets. Ready to put money and time back in your pockets and then spend that time working on your supply chain strategy? Visit flywheeldigital.com, head to the link in the episode description, or reach out directly to me to learn more. Okay, maybe that wasn't exactly what we just covered, but now I promise we're going into that recap. Danny walked through how to use a point of market entry analysis, supported by AMC Insights, a common theme in this episode, to determine which products are driving higher new-to-brand purchases as the starting point for where to be focusing your new-to-brand efforts from a product lens. And then he did a whole lot of math to talk through how you can use that information to calculate what consumers who make repeat purchases are worth in the long term, which circles back to helping you understand what amount it's worth to acquire those new-to-brand consumers. And I'm adding in that since we can see who, via consumer ID on Amazon at least, not their actual names, no PII, okay? You can then build AMC audiences based on people like those ones who made their way to that first conversion and market specifically to those more likely to make that first new-to-brand purchase. Holy cow, okay. All of that focused on the new-to-brand acquisition, but what we haven't discussed is how to actually guide those new-to-brand purchasers to become product lovers who repeat purchase, and then brand loyalists who explore the rest of your brand and buy multiple products repeatedly.
That's where really effective AMC audiences come into play. So you can see exactly who those consumers are who have leaked, and you can see the same consumers who have purchased over time, and you can create different custom audiences. So lookalikes based on people who look like your new-to-brand purchasers, lookalikes based on people who are likely to subscribe and save, or if you have seen other individual instances, so I could see a consumer who buys product A is likely to buy product B, then recreate that behavior as much as you can with consumers who have bought product A by retargeting them with product B. The other that you also get through AMC is the amount of time between when somebody purchased A, then B, and that also dictates your retargeting strategy too. So, for example, I might say a consumer who bought A, then B, it took them 3 months to come back and buy. If I start all of a sudden retargeting consumers who bought A with product B 2 months later, that might have happened on its own anyway. So that's where negative targeting comes into play. I would much rather wait 3 months and a day, and then I know that my advertisement was incremental to drive that downstream purchase.
Boom. I like it. I'm thinking of back to your 1.5x as just like a generic measurement of like one product's lifetime or long-term value. And back to this 1.5x, that number can technically increase over time too, right? Though, like if let's say that example was like looking at maybe 3 months later, the value in 3 months is 1.5x. But if it's like a subscribe and save, that's just going to keep going up, right?
Well, you hope, but so the beauty of, or maybe like the limitation of subscribe and save relative to long-term value is that I have a brand that's in my head. It's a water flosser. The long-term value on water flossers is 1-to-1. I buy one water flosser. I've got that water flosser until that thing breaks. And hopefully if it's really high quality, it'll never break. I'm out of market for probably 3 years until a new version comes along. But the subscribe and save rate of a water flosser is very high. And I'll tell you why.
Interesting.
Replacement heads. So the same thing as like an electric toothbrush. So you end up with this really high subscription rate because people will constantly need this replacement part. But the value of that replacement part change. It's nothing. Relative to I sell paper towels, it's our classic example, and I subscribe and save to that. And every single time I'm buying the full product again every 3 to 6 months, my long-term value and my subscribe and save are both high. So subscribe and save it's not quite a vanity metric, but it's a metric that shows likelihood to repeat, but it doesn't show the value of the likelihood to repeat. So what LTV does is it tells me where am I most likely to get consumers who are potentially going to buy the same product over and over again that are valuable. And then what I can do with that is then I could say, okay, that's where I invest my subscribe and save attention. And then I can run subscribe and save custom audiences. I can run subscribe and save vouchers or coupons. I can have subscribe and save content show up on the PDP. That's where you can really lean into that particular signal. but you only know that it's worth your time if you've seen that there's value from it from LTV.
I'm here for my last jump in until my usual parting speech at the end, now that we've dug even deeper into long-term value and strategies for driving long-term value. My closing food for thought for you all is that when you have a grasp of how to drive long-term value for your brand, you then also have the power to start shifting away from ROAS as one of your key metrics of success. Obviously, when you're at the very granular level of campaign performance for one specific AMC audience that you used for new-to-brand acquisition, ROAS will still be a metric that you look at and rely on to tell you what went on. But overall, brands should be shifting to thinking about the return on their consumers versus the return on their ad spend. Because you can pretty accurately measure consumers, their behaviors, their purchases over time, and predict how much value they'll contribute over time. That's way more telling than your ad spend. And beyond that, we have some cool things coming soon related to how you further apply this philosophy and measure the future potential and current impact of consumers throughout different places within the funnel. But you'll have to stay tuned for that. Keep return on consumer on your mind, though. There's more coming soon. Okay, let's send off Danny with the standard "what is something on your digital wish list that you won't purchase and why" question.
So I had my wedding a year and a half ago, and I have all these wedding pictures, and I do not have a wedding album, and I need to make one. And so it's on my digital wish list, and it's coming. I promise.
Are you going to very customize? Are you going to do it very custom to how you want it, or just send off the pictures to a company and be like, all right, Shutterfly, put this together?
I haven't yet decided. I think in my heart, I would like to customize, and then in my head, it'll probably be Shutterfly.
And that wraps up another episode of the Commerce Collective podcast. Thank you again and again and again to Danny for sharing his insights. I've been your host, Emma Irwin, and we'll see you next time.